Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai ki tēnei hui. Welcome to this 49th episode of Tech Bytes. Ko Craig Angaho, the CEO of Tuans, coming up to 10 and a half years now. It's been great. So we're now into the second half of 2025, and our focus for this quarter is going to be around the uptake of responsible and inclusive use of AI in Aotearoa. So to kick it off, I've asked my friend from Spark, Matt Bain, to be my guest and to answer some questions. And Matt did actually speak on this topic 2 years ago, back at our Tech User Summit in 2023. So kia ora, Matt, welcome. By way of introduction, tell us a little bit about what you do and where you're based.
Kia ora, Craig. Thanks for having me. Good to be back. So I'm based in Auckland, in Spark's Auckland office. And here I'm responsible for brand and marketing, but also technology, product, and AI and automation. So that stuff's all starting to converge together, which is interesting.
And that's really where we want to start talking to you about, you've got a marketing background, but how did you start getting started and thinking about how to use these new tools that AI was enabling in your area?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to be working in a technology and marketing business based out of Europe for 20 years. And so data and technology was always part of my skill set. And when I arrived back in New Zealand around 6 years ago, I'd been working on a bunch of AI capabilities, both for marketing, but also with large businesses, whether it was Formula One or Siemens, who were using digital twins and AI in their business already. So people think this is a new thing. LLMs are new, but predictive analytics and digital twins have actually been around for and used by businesses for a long time.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you're right. AI is not a new technology. And while we might be in the hype curve at the moment, it's the hype curve for the particular type that we're dealing with now.
Yeah, I guess when I arrived, I think a lot about what's inevitable. And I had seen the rate at which it was changing and being used globally. And I kind of felt in a technology business like Spark, you could see inevitable use cases across the business as it's developed. And when we started 6 years ago, it was with predictive analytics, right? And so that was how could we predict the next best action for any given customer at any given time. And so the value of doing that in terms of the satisfaction of your customers, your ability to not just give them better service, but also make sure they've got the right products and services, that pays off, quite quickly. Now, predictive analytics, back in the days, it was quite expensive and difficult to put in place. And so I guess that's one of the things that's changed a lot since we started. But I think one of the things that we did at the beginning, when we started, we were very, primitive in the way we thought about data. And we realized that things could move fast and there would be a lot of ambiguity. And so we kind of went back to basics. So we started with a set of ethical-based principles that we thought would keep us and our people safe and our customers safe as we move forward. And we chose ethical principles because we wanted to have a set of guidelines that were over and above what was legally required. And so we actually published our guidelines really early on our website. They're still there so that any business could grab them and use them as a starting point. But really it was about that. And then it was the level below that is kind of things like, privacy. So we use GDPR, which is a European standard here, expecting that privacy controls would move on. So really going, okay, what's the foundations of a business that would increasingly use AI? And the reason that's important is it becomes, in some ways, a moat, but really it gives your teams the ability to move at pace and feel safe that they're working within the right guardrails. And so that's why that's really important for businesses. You don't want to have to go back and try and retrofit that once you got started. You really need to have those in mind at the beginning and then refine as you go.
Those are great points, because if you think about it, Spark in its current shape, it is a company that's got a long history. It's a was a telecommunications company. I don't think you'd think of yourself as just a telco these days. So bringing those sorts of skills and things into it must have been interesting.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of, we'll come on to training, but there's a huge amount of, when you start this journey, my view is you need a vision, quite a big vision for where it's going. And a big vision is helpful because of the ambiguity I mentioned before. It means that you don't have to keep changing your vision as things change.
Yeah.
But we also realized there would be some real pinch points, like if marketers were going to be using AI tools and privacy was going to be a concern, we couldn't have a big queue of people at our privacy desk constantly asking questions and asking for clarity. So we trained a cohort of people and embedded them within the business that were privacy experts. And we did the same thing when AI started to scale, so that we made sure that the teams had at least, the first point of contact was someone in your own team who could provide guidance. And again, that was all about how can we be nimble about this in a fast-moving environment and make sure our people feel equipped to handle concerns that come up as they go.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about issuing guidelines, and maybe we could just come back to that a little bit. So can we talk about, we're approaching this topic, Two Hands, from a theme of encouraging the uptake of responsible and inclusive use of AI. And we're very careful about that wording. We use the word encourage because obviously we want people to use new technology and new tools, but we're also aware of, making sure we do it the right way. I mean, what do you think should be meant by those words, responsible and inclusive use?
And so we have, as I said, so we've got about 7 AI principles, and to give you, there's probably 3 that are key. So one is diversity, inclusivity, and bias, right? So you can have intentional and unintentional biases creep into behavior, whether it's human behavior or, machines built by human behavior. So one of the things is as we build this, how are we accounting for, tracking, and observing implications that might flag up, unfair outcomes or bias towards a certain group, and it's going to be natural that happens. So there's a few things we do. One is we would control the data that a model can use, right? So if gender is not important, why would you put gender in, for example? And then we also have tools and when we first started, these weren't as freely available, and it was manual, but increasingly there's tools that you can license that will actually scan and control for diversity, inclusivity, and bias in the decisions that are being made. So that's really helpful. I guess the second one is transparency. And so when we started building predictive models, my assumption was always that, a bit like your accounting files, there would be some external auditor that would come in and audit a large organization like us to go, actually, are you really doing what you say you're doing? And for an auditor to be effective, they would need to be able to observe how a model made decisions and the decision it made, and then what it did with that. So we built transparency as a key feature, so that in our marketing area, for example, you can observe at an interaction level what data a model used to make a decision, why it made that decision, and what the action was. And so again, those are key principles to have at the start, because building that stuff in afterwards is difficult. And there are internationally companies who have had their models taken off them because they haven't, they've actually been audited, and if you lose a model, that could have cost you millions of dollars to develop, right, for a large organization. So that's non-trivial. And I guess the third piece was kind of informed human decision making. And there's 2 parts to that. One is to make sure that we have the right skills overseeing the decision making that's being built. And the second part of that is, if we can't build the model to be reliable, we will put a human in the loop. So a good example of this is when we created our HR bot, which was designed to take the pressure off our HR people who are constantly asking questions and therefore weren't getting to the more important work. We found it given the ambiguity of HR policies, we found it very difficult to train a model to accurately answer directly to our people. So what it used to do is it would take the question and it would create a draft email and put it in the drafts folder of one of our HR people. So it had taken a lot of the work out, but we still had a human overseeing the final outcome. So that's a bit of an example of how those 3 principles at least are applied and come into effect in the business.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and ask you to think a bit broader than that. So what about as a nation? How do you think what those words mean as a nation, as New Zealand? Yeah.
Yep. So I think you can take those same principles and go, as a nation, how do we allow access at scale to constituents that might not have access to it. Now, that's probably not so different from the connectivity challenge you guys have. Is, not being connected is terrible in today's world. So there's something there. Then there's some work we've been doing to go, how do you responsibly use AI to engage with ethnic groups that are non-European? And so we've done a lot of work with Māori stakeholders to go, how do we very different cultural values around the use of data and what data means. And therefore, how do we work with those constituents to start to build guidelines that mean we can serve them in a way that protects what's important to them? And the Māori view of data is very different to the transactional European view we have. But that actually, it shows up in some different ways too. So also the way that models that are built in a European context would engage would be quite transactional. Right? Other cultures have much more relationship focused engagements, and so you don't do a transaction up front. You build a relationship over time. So we're also thinking about how are we more empathetic? How do we build these models to be more empathetic than we could be without AI? And so I think that's the way we're thinking about it. I think the challenge there is that these models, when you get to LLMs, are built. The foundation models are built globally, all right? So they're built on global data, and so you need to build representation for other groups at a local level, right? But the ability to do that's here now, so you can actually take those models and then train them on specific data. I think there's also a thing which is, if we don't take the Māori example, if we don't train some models on Māori data, which is fraught with some peril, you actually don't get a true representation of the Māori culture. You get kind of a bastardized one, which is collected from around the world. So there's two sides to it. If you move fast, there's some cultural issues with moving fast, but if you do move fast, you actually create a truer representation of that culture, which is beneficial.
Yeah. I think you've highlighted something in there too, like just listening to you talk about you're interchanging between, the way you use data and the large language models. And I'm just thinking about, our themes for the year around being safe and secure online, data privacy, being connected, generative AI. It's all, it's got to work together. It can't work by itself.
Yeah, I think there's also a look back here, which is many of the listeners today have probably used Google Maps. They might go home and watch Netflix. Now, these are all platforms powered by AI. Right now, Uber doesn't feel like an AI platform. It's literally a massive data model, that's applying AI to make sure that your taxi turns up at the right place at the right time for the right price. Yeah. And so I think while this is new, it's also not new. And it's the scale and pace of change which is concerning, rather than the fact that this stuff can be incredibly useful and solve all sorts of problems and make our lives better if applied in the right way. So I think there's two sides to this, and often the fearful side is what's played up in the media.
Yeah.
But the health outcomes that this can drive for New Zealand, the opportunities for growth aren't often talked about as much. So I think you get this bias in the media for fear versus actually this is a really interesting and potentially productive and helpful technology.
Oh, look, I deal with the media all the time, and they're always looking for that angle. It gets me into trouble every now and then when they take things out of context. But yeah, sometimes I wish the Netflix AI was a little bit more responsive, actually, because I wanted to bring me more things that I don't know about. But the beauty of it is you do know when you're not on your own profile, because you can tell that these aren't movies that I'm interested in at all. So
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, if you use Google Maps, it's always you're just feeding it information. It's building its models. It's continuing to grow. I'm a huge user of Google Maps in Auckland, because you just never know what the traffic's going to be like.
Yeah.
Is there anything else at Spark that you're doing that you think others should learn from and look to when they're implementing this sort of technology?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're fortunate in that we're a large organization, so we were able to get started a while ago on this. We started with one model right? So the other thing I think is, as we go back to that fear piece, there's a lot of things that are a bit challenging around AI, and there's some hard use cases that are potentially risky, but there's a huge number that aren't, right? And so if you take an area like call centers, where we have a call center database, right? That's data which we keep up to date, nothing particularly sketchy about it, and you can train an LLM on it really quickly to make sure that our call center people can get answers more quickly, and then spend more time with our customers. And the second bit we did was writing notes. So when we take a call, if you call a call center, the person that answers writes notes about the call, because if you get passed to another department, it's really helpful that they don't have to ask you everything again. And we used to have 20% of those notes completed when humans did it. Now AI does it. It's 98% or something of them are completed. So there's things like that which are relatively safe, relatively accessible and easy to do. And so one of the things that we did, which I think others should learn from, is just get started. We didn't know where this was going when we got started. When we got started, it was also more expensive and harder to get started. And the sort of applications I just spoke about, even for a small business, hugely accessible. One of our directors was in Sydney the other day, called a restaurant because she was running late, was scared she'd lose her table. And an agent answers, "Hi, I'm an agent. How can I help you?" And then answer their questions. Look, I'll get the maitre d' to call you back. And if you think about a small business which is understaffed and trying to serve at a busy time, the fact that a restaurant can do that means it's so accessible that anyone really should be thinking about what's the first use case that we want to try, just to get some confidence with this technology and understand how it can help us.
Yeah, that restaurant story is a great story.
The future is to create it in some ways, right? Like,
yeah,
just getting started in a really low risk way that you and your people can understand, that creates some benefit in the business. I think it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah. Oh, look, we're a small organization, but we're utilizing it. It's giving us value because we're a bit more productive. It takes out of our workday, it writes reports for us, okay, we've got to go back and put that human layer over the top of it, but it gets you started. I mean, for me personally, I'm not a writer, so a blank page is the scariest thing in my life. So having something that starts me off is great. Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, in parallel to getting started, a real focus on education is required. And so we actually last year partnered with a university in the US and brought a mini MBA to New Zealand, and we've been putting our people and our clients through that. And that takes them from the very basics through to building their own models in about 6 weeks. And all the feedback's been incredible. People walk in not understanding it, and they come out going, "Well, I already feel empowered, and with enough understanding that I think I can get started. I'm not scared anymore. I'm actually quite excited to go and see how I could apply this in my business and to talk to the rest of my people about it." So that education thing has to be in parallel with like trying stuff. Otherwise, what we've found is people feel like AI is being done to them. And so you need to, in parallel, bring your people, and I think this is something for New Zealand. How do we bring the people of New Zealand on this journey at scale is a real challenge for us as a country if we're going to make the most of this.
Yeah, well, let me pick you up on that point because, talking about New Zealand, when we did the CIO report at the beginning of the year, a lot of it was around, we're heading into the 2nd or 3rd year of generative AI and trying to figure out what they're doing. I mean, how well do you think we are as a country prepared for the future that we want in this area?
I think we're unprepared. If you look at most rankings, we're quite, in the OECD, we're quite far down the list. And it's a little bit strange to me. There seems to be more fear about this in New Zealand than in other markets, and I'm not quite sure why this is. Maybe it's because as a technology, we're getting it at the same time as the rest of the world. Often there's a lag for some of this stuff, right? Like the .com boom, there's a bit of a lag. And in the past, it's been not for everyone. So a few big companies could afford to do it, and it would slowly democratize. Generative AI is democratized incredibly fast. As you say, you use it. There's free versions that every household can use. I use it with my daughter when she's doing her homework, and we talk to it and ask it questions. And so the accessibility and the fact that it's almost everything everywhere all at once, I think is freaking New Zealand out a bit. And I again come back to, because we're not in the States and we don't see and feel it happening all around us in a way that everyone's talking about and doing, we need to get started. And it might be a function of our remoteness, maybe. or maybe something around the Kiwi psyche. But I think there's a real opportunity here for us to catch up. And I think there might be something in our scale which helps us. So the bigger a country is, the more legacy it has and the harder it is to change. And we're quite a small country. We found this at Spark, relative to other telcos when we look globally, we'd actually moved a lot faster. Now, we'd like to think it's because we're smarter, but I think it's probably because we're actually of a scale that we can use it really effectively, but not so big like a Verizon. That is almost impossible to get everywhere. So I think then I've been thinking to myself that could be true of New Zealand, right? This actually could be an opportunity for us as a country. If we get our arms around this, if we go faster, we'll learn more, we'll be less scared of it, but also we'll understand the risks and be able to mitigate them. Not getting involved and hoping the risks don't come is not realistic. The risks will come whether we do it or not. So the more control we can take of our own destiny in this area, the better. I think the problem is the kids are all doing it, but the kids aren't in the workforce at the scale we are. So I think it's the rest of us that need to probably get our hands dirty a bit more.
And it's no use waiting for the government to take a lead in this sort of stuff, because this is moving too quick for them to deal with. I got asked the other day, by someone in government, did I want regulation to be put in place for AI? And I said no, because by the time you get that done, that'll be 2 or 3 years' time, and we'll have moved on from there. You have to look at this technology quite differently from the way you used to look at other technologies. So
I think public-private partnership will probably be really important there. And the regulation thing's a double-edged sword, because regulation is good because it slows down the progress of AI, but it's bad if only one country does it, right? And we're seeing this in Europe, where Europe's not getting the latest models in ChatGPT, for example, because of regulation. So the other markets are actually having more capability than them. So there's this real problem with regulation in this area, where there are some requirements for it, of course, but it needs to be appropriate. Otherwise, you slow down the development of the country.
Well, of course, the Trump America is looking at not regulating AI for several years, putting that in place. So that's sort of like the other extreme, isn't it? So
100%, yeah.
Well, look, we talked about AI, but you're a man who knows a lot about technology, so it's on our doorstep. But what other technologies do you think are going to play a part in how they're going to develop over the next few years?
I think it comes back to your point before about convergence, right? So AI is stacking on other technologies. So drones have been a recent invention, but drones plus AI all of a sudden enable autonomous delivery, and we're hearing more and more about that. Self-driving cars are coming. That's largely because AI. Electric cars were here, but AI is making that possible. We've just recently done some work with Air New Zealand, where we put 5G into one of their environments, so they could do stock take by drone, and it speeds everything up. So the convergence of, let's say, take 5G, which for telcos, monetizing that hasn't come to life as strongly as globally as we'd thought. But AI is starting to make that more possible, because having a low latency, a high speed network that's local to you that can support, things like drones running on AI. It's the stacking of that, of robotics, autonomy, and the reasoning that AI can do, is creating a lot of the momentum we're seeing internationally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just take that a little bit further. You've worked with a lot of technologies across various contexts. What's one surprising insight you've gained about the relationship between technology and users do you think would resonate with our audience here in New Zealand?
One surprising insight. I guess the most surprising thing to me has been the lack of curiosity about this, if I'm honest. I'm not sure how you experience this talking to various people, but given how pervasive it is, it's really surprising that, even in our own organization, you really need to push. I wouldn't, for people listening that are really excited about this and want to push it through their organization, don't underestimate how complacent a lot of other people are about it. And the lack of interest. I mean, there's some people I spoke to, I'm like, well, in 5 years, I don't think this job exists. I think you can have a job, but it won't be this one, because AI is going to have this one. And people are surprised. And I think that's surprising to me. I'm not sure if it's other people, but it feels like a futile movement to resist.
Mm.
And in my mind, you go, well, we should be learning about, if this is going to change the world, we should learn as much as we can about it as quickly as possible. And that puts us in the best position. So that's probably the thing that constantly surprises me. It's not a technology problem, it's a human problem. And this is why I keep going back to education. The reason that those people are embracing it is because I think they see it as a threat, not as an opportunity. And we have to be optimistic about what's possible while being cognizant of potential risks as we go, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, well, on that point, I mean, how do you see someone like us, 2Ns, Technology Users Association, what can we do to help shape the future of that sort of technology adoption and policy?
I think the more we can bring people together to understand, inform a view on where this is going, and agree that there's risks and how to mitigate them, and we'll do it in a way that's responsible and takes minorities that might be left behind with us, is probably the conversation, because I think AI can be part of the solution to this. Like AI, if you have problems, you can ask AI and it'll come back with solutions for you, for example. So going and writing papers and disseminating them, all the insight, research and thinking that has to be done to solve this problem can be augmented with AI to help us get there faster in a way that might make it more possible than previous initiatives, right? Because these things often fall down because people are doing it off the corner of their desk and can't get there. So I think if AI can make us 10 times faster, then a smaller number of people can probably achieve more around educating the country, engaging people in a way that they understand. So I think that's probably the key.
Yeah. Hello, Matt. It's been a real privilege, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. It covered quite a lot of distance, and but I've decided to start ending these conversations with this last question, which I don't know if you listened to a podcast from the New York Times, but Ezra Klein asked this one. Let's finish up with a final question. What 2 books are you reading or read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I was thinking about this, and I can't remember the last time I read a book. And I know that that's a bad thing because I used to be a voracious reader, but I'm actually a full podcast convert, and I absorb a huge amount of information through podcasts. And I think there's a couple, I was a long list of them, but there's a couple which I thought were interesting because they cover a broad range of topics, which include quite long sessions on AI with AI leaders, and where they talk about it in an accessible way. And one of them is Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. Not sure if you heard of that. And then the other one's Lex Friedman. I just think that what's interesting about that is they have international people with different perspectives come on. They're long form, like 1 or 2 hours, but it'd be worthwhile having a look through those 2 and then going, where's the AI focused ones? And it provides a lot of context around what's happening globally with AI and the changes that will affect this country eventually.
All right. Well, thanks once again, Matt, for joining us and giving us your time. And thanks, everyone, for listening in. You'll be able to see this on our YouTube channel and on any podcast platform that you like. So thanks again, and ka kite.
Ciao. Thanks, Sam.